From loud public outbursts and bizarre punishments to moments that seem downright cruel, Lois is far from the calm and nurturing television mother audiences are used to seeing. Throughout Malcolm in the Middle, she screams at her sons, humiliates them, controls nearly every aspect of their lives, and occasionally goes to extreme lengths to teach them a lesson, including, at one point, attempting to permanently scar them. But Malcolm and his brothers are hardly innocent. They lie, destroy property, manipulate their parents, and constantly push Lois beyond her breaking point. So, is Lois's parenting genuinely cruel and excessive, or are her extreme methods understandable given how chaotic, destructive, and unpredictable her sons can be? Was Lois a good mom? Let's take a look at Season 1, Episode 9, Lois vs. Evil. Towards the beginning of the episode, Lois is waiting for her shift to end, and unfortunately for her, she has no choice but to have her boys with her. Right away, Malcolm and Reese immediately start causing trouble messing with a steam blaster, to which Lois screams at them and later punishes them by putting them in this prisoner stance that we will definitely be seeing more of later in the show. This is totally justified, as Reese and Malcolm were acting like total idiots. In fact, I would say that their punishment is pretty lenient, as when Hal walks past them and asks how much longer they have, Reese says they have another hour. There's no way to tell exactly what time Lois gets home from work with the boys to start the punishment, or what time it is when Hal gets home, but my best guess is that they had to do this for about 2 or 3 hours, which is very light considering what they were doing. Regardless, the thing I want to highlight from this episode is actually what happens with Dewey. While Malcolm and Reese are acting like buffoons at Lucky Aid, this leaves Dewey with no parental eyes on him, which gives him an opportunity to steal something from the store off screen. Later in the episode, it is revealed that what he stole was a bottle of cognac. Not just any cognac, but a very fancy cognac with a hefty price of $150. Now, as bad as this seems, Dewey did end up feeling pretty guilty about this. When Hal gets home, Lois claims that she hasn't seen Dewey, to which Hal ends up finding him secluded in shame in his little hiding spot. Given the circumstances, what Lois does next is easily one of her best parenting moments in the entire show, followed by one of her worst parenting moments. To teach Dewey a lesson about what he did, she takes Dewey back to the Lucky Aid and makes him return the bottle to Mr. Pinter, the store's manager, telling him that he's going to apologize for what he did and accept the consequences. Morally speaking, Lois is doing a great thing by making Dewey do this. Dewey stole something, and now Lois is going to make him deal with the repercussions of that, showing him that stealing is wrong. However, here's where things head south. First of all, I am not entirely sure what sort of consequences Lois expected that Dewey would have to face. Mr. Pinter does not have any parental control over Dewey, so it's not like he could punish him or would even try to. Secondly, Dewey is a kid who clearly didn't know the consequences of his actions, so it's super unlikely that Mr. Pinter would call the cops or something like that. So aside from having to face an unfamiliar adult and tell him what he did, what exactly was Lois expecting Dewey would have to do? Was she expecting that Dewey would return the bottle and then Mr. Pinter would scold and reprimand Dewey for his actions? Did she expect Mr. Pinter to enforce a punishment onto Dewey that Lois would respect and carry out? Realistically speaking, any consequences that Dewey would face would only be the ones that are given to him directly from Lois. Given this, right when Lois and Dewey return the cognac to Mr. Pinter, Lois gets fired, inadvertently teaching Dewey that if you steal something, you definitely should not tell anyone, as Lois losing her job ends up putting the entire family through a financial crisis for this episode. Now, is it fair that Lois lost her job for this? Of course not. But in her very next line after getting fired, she claims that he didn't steal it, he returned it, teaching Dewey that taking something without asking isn't stealing as long as you return it. She then goes on to claim that the bottle is perfectly fine, so it can just go right back up on the shelf as if nothing happened. And yeah, from our perspective, we know the bottle of cognac is fine and could be returned, but from Mr. Pinter's view, there's no way that he can just put this back on the shelf for someone else to buy. He only knows Lois from a professional workplace standpoint and doesn't know her kids at all. In fact, his one and only impression of Lois's kids are when Reese and Malcolm were causing a disturbance with the steam machine earlier. So, from his point of view, who's to say that these kids didn't open up the bottle and pee in it or something like that? So, she gets fired, gets mad, and then rips Mr. Pinter's toupee off. So yeah, it really seems like Dewey learned a great lesson here overall. This episode is a pretty good example of the problem with Lois's parenting as a whole. Her initial instinct is actually pretty reasonable. Dewey stole something, so she makes him return it and admit what he did. But once the consequences start affecting Lois herself, the lesson suddenly changes. And sometimes, the problem isn't even the lesson Lois is trying to teach. It's simply how far she is willing to take the punishment. Next, let's jump to Season 2, Episode 5, Casino. This is the episode where Malcolm and his family take yet another vacation, but this time to a Native American resort with a casino. However, the specific moment I want to highlight from this episode is actually the cold opening. We start off during the night with Hal and Lois in bed as Hal suddenly awakes, explaining to Lois that he has the sinking feeling that they have forgotten something. Cut to the next morning and we see Dewey leaning in a corner as punishment for, well, we don't actually know what he did. This was the thing they forgot. They punished Dewey by putting him in timeout in a corner and then forgot about him, making him literally fall asleep while standing. And this is where it becomes difficult to defend Lois by simply saying that her children are difficult. Whatever Dewey did, forgetting that your child is standing in punishment until he literally falls asleep there is something completely different. However, there are also moments where Lois proves that she is capable of finding punishments that actually work without going completely insane. During the Season 2 episode, Reese Cooks, Lois ends up finding a more effective and healthy way to punish Reese. During this episode, Hal forces Reese to sign up for a cooking class. Originally, this is meant to be a punishment for him, since during the beginning of the episode, he shaved some kid's head and ran away, I guess. Although Reese doesn't want to do this class at all and does see this as a punishment, we end up finding out that Reese is actually a genius when it comes to cooking. He instantly masters any form of prep techniques that are shown to him, and he seems to have a profound understanding of flavors and ingredients, which leads him to easily outshining everyone in his class in the process. This makes Reese fall in love with the culinary arts. But even though Reese found his new thing, he is still, well, Reese. So, towards the end of the episode, when the entire cooking class participates in a cooking competition, Reese takes it upon himself to sabotage his classmates' dishes. After this, as Lois and Hal are chewing him out, something clicks and they finally realize how they can punish Reese. They tell him that he isn't allowed to cook anything or use the kitchen for 1 month. And this works. This totally gets through to Reese as he begs and pleads with his parents, stating that he will do whatever they say. They finally found a healthy, normal way to punish Reese. It's a shame that they don't seem to use this form of punishment on him ever again, but I'll take it. This is probably one of the clearest examples that Reese actually can be disciplined without turning the house into a prison camp. The problem is that finding something that actually gets through to Reese is easier said than done. Lois has tried other ways to motivate Reese towards the right direction, like when she made him in charge of the family's garage sale in Season 4. The family needs money to fix their broken wall, so they organize a giant yard sale. Lois decides to put Reese in charge as to give him some responsibility. Obviously, this notoriously backfired. Putting Reese in charge made him command everyone to organize all of the items by color. When Malcolm found an old computer worth a couple $1,000s, Reese took it and snapped it in half. And at the end of it all, Reese was under the impression that because he was in charge, he got to keep all of the money, and he orders a jet ski. Needless to say, this did not help Lois as she becomes increasingly hopeless towards Reese's future as the show progresses. But another major problem with Lois isn't really how she punishes her children. It's how quickly she can decide that she is right and refuse to consider anything else. In Season 2, during the episode Old Mrs. Old, Malcolm and his brothers are playing outside with other kids from the neighborhood when suddenly a ball flies into one of the neighbors' yards. All of the kids are too afraid to go retrieve retrieve said ball because the person who lives there is a mean old lady who hates children named Mrs. Griffith. Malcolm, being the bravest of the bunch, decides to roll the dice anyways and goes to retrieve the ball. Once near the ball, Mrs. Griffith catches him and they enter a skirmish over the ball that causes her to break her arm. Later, Lois finds out about this and cannot, for the life of her, understand Malcolm's situation. Malcolm tries to explain to her that the lady literally grabbed his arm and tried to trap him, so he pushed her off of her, but all Lois understands is, you broke her arm. So, to prove a point, Malcolm has to go to Mrs. Griffith's house every day after school and do whatever she says until her arm is healed. This shows Lois's tendency to overgeneralize things and also shows that her blind passion for justice can sometimes get in the way of fully understanding the situation. Sure, you could say that Malcolm shouldn't have entered Mrs. Griffith's property and all that, but he really did not have any malicious intent in doing so. He really was just trying to get a ball from her yard to continue his game, to which Mrs. Griffith clearly blew out of proportion.
My property, my ball!
What exactly is the lesson that Malcolm is supposed to take from this? If there is any lesson for Malcolm to learn, it's that if something bad happens, he should not tell Lois. And this mentality doesn't only show up when Lois is punishing someone. Once Lois decides that something is right or wrong, changing her mind can become almost impossible. For example, her vendetta on motorcycles. Around season 2, the boys purchase a mini bike from a garbage man. They then all work together to actually restore the thing and get it running. However, the moment they turn the ignition for the first time, Lois immediately takes the keys away, stating that they can't have a motorcycle. The boys try to reason with her, explaining that it's a mini bike designed for kids, but Lois won't hear anything about it. Lois is dead set in her mind that motorcycles are dangerous. Therefore, anything even close to resembling a motorcycle is also dangerous. Two wheels, motorcycle. End of discussion. Now in this instance, Lois does ultimately end up being convinced to let the boys ride the motorcycle, even though Lois was actually right that they were dangerous since Reese snuck out with the bike the night prior and hurt himself while riding it. And that is what makes Lois difficult to judge. Sometimes she is stubborn and completely unwilling to listen, only for the thing she was worried about to happen anyway. Let's talk about the complex relationship that she has with her son, Malcolm. This episode follows Malcolm as he begins escaping class to visit the school therapist. The thing is, Malcolm doesn't actually need a therapist. He's only doing all of this so he can get out of class. As the episode progresses, Malcolm continues to see the school therapist so he can ditch class, to which Reese of all people finds out and starts doing the same thing. The episode ends on a crescendo as the therapist comes to Malcolm's house to talk to his family, as it is presumed that Malcolm, and especially Reese, shared some very interesting things with her, prompting Mrs. Therapy Lady to disregard several therapeutic policies and share her findings with Lois. As Lois and the therapist sit down and begin talking with Malcolm, Lois's body language and witty responses spell out that she isn't taking this seriously at all, and Malcolm will be in huge trouble once the eyes of public school officials are out of the picture. However, as the discussion with Malcolm goes on, he begins to reveal actual things that are bothering him in his life. He feels overly pressured being the only genius in the family and feels like he can't handle the giant weight on his shoulders given to him by Lois. Originally, Lois wasn't taking this seriously at all, but as Malcolm begins to open up about these things, Lois actually begins to hear him rather than just see him. We end on a strong emotional moment between Lois and Malcolm, proving that Lois isn't all fists and rocks, but can also be an excellent emotional support for her children. Lois was a little fiery out of the gates, but ended up taking this seriously and allowing Malcolm and herself to be vulnerable. Malcolm getting through to Lois is often the hard part, because one of the biggest problems in their relationship is that Lois doesn't just want Malcolm to succeed, she has a very specific idea of what Malcolm's life is supposed to look like. During the season 2 episode, Bowling, it splits off into two alternate timelines where both Hal and Lois separately take Reese and Malcolm to a bowling get-together with other kids from their school, while the other parent sits back to watch over Dewey. When Lois takes them, she seems to take great joy in embarrassing Malcolm. She makes it look like she's trying to help him get better at bowling, but it's clear that Malcolm doesn't really care at all about bowling and really just came to hang out with the other kids. Let's be real, these are all teenagers, that's probably why all of them came. And Lois could not have been blind to this. Of these kids' parents, Lois seems to be the only one who isn't willing to allow her kids to be alone, unsupervised at a bowling alley. Now, this is definitely justified to one degree since we all know what Malcolm and Reese are capable of, but if chaperoning wasn't enough, she repeatedly makes Malcolm look like a sissy by putting up the inflated gutters and having him use a child-sized bowling ball. Obviously, this is all extremely stressful and degrading for Malcolm, which causes him to get in his head, making him completely unable to bowl whatsoever. And it's clearly because of Lois. It's not like Malcolm is just unusually bad at bowling or something. In the timeline where Hal is the one who takes them, Malcolm gets a ton of strikes and seems to be doing just fine. She does this again in Season 5 when Malcolm goes to a college visit where he stays in a dorm, just like in real college. Even though Malcolm is supposed to be doing this alone, like the other students, Lois takes it upon herself to accompany him in this, to Malcolm's disappointment. While she's here, she decides to do everything in her power to make everything that's going on her way. She divides up the dorm rooms by gender, reveals embarrassing things about Malcolm to the other students, and even gets in a petty squabble with an uptight resident advisor and forces Malcolm to get involved. It's actually ridiculous the way she acts in this episode. At one point, the snobby resident advisor attempts to flex his power by locking down the vending machine as Malcolm tries to get a snack. After this, Lois is talking to the other students, explaining that they can work together to blackmail the advisor or find something dirty about his past. That is actually insane to suggest that to these kids. She doesn't consider anyone else or what this might do for their chances of getting accepted into the college. These are two completely different situations at two completely different stages of Malcolm's life, but Lois behaves almost exactly the same way. Malcolm is trying to experience something independently, and Lois feels the need to insert herself into the situation and control how everything happens. And this isn't just because she thinks Malcolm is irresponsible. Lois seems to have this idea that since Malcolm is super smart, he is the family's only chance of leaving poverty. Therefore, Malcolm is not supposed to be popular or socially successful at school, as she believes that this will interfere with his studies. During Season 3, Malcolm ends up getting his first girlfriend. Instead of Lois being excited for Malcolm, she is absolutely furious. She later explains to Hal that girls are not supposed to like him until he's, quote, 28 and a billionaire. She even tries to blame Hal for this since he bought Malcolm acne medicine. Let me repeat that. She's mad at Hal because he gave Malcolm medicine for his acne. Lois is so righteous in her opinion that Malcolm isn't allowed to have a good social life that she would willingly deny him medicine. As Lois and Hal are tucking themselves into bed, she questions why her kids are so stupid and then comforts herself by saying that they don't have to let the kids visit when they grow up and have families. Yeah. Lois does have a goal in all of this, however. It is revealed in the final episode of the show that she is expecting Malcolm to become the President of the United States. All of this sabotage to Malcolm's social life is due to her grand visions of a future for Malcolm that he never chose. Obviously, we can look at the new series and see that he never actually became the president, but still, Malcolm isn't the only victim when it comes to Lois's extreme methods of sabotaging critical development stages of her children. She did it to Reese in Season 6 during the cold opening of the episode Stilts, when she found a nudie magazine in Reese's stuff, and then proceeded to take a bunch of selfies and paste her face on all of the girls in the magazine, then putting it back for Reese to find later. This is certainly an interesting way of doing things. And because she believes so strongly that she knows what is best for her children, she doesn't always apply the same standards to each one of them either. In season 3, Francis comes home full of joy with his newfound wife, Piyama. Lois is absolutely furious and refuses to even acknowledge Piyama for the rest of the episode. Now, sure, Francis did meet Piyama on the way down here, and it may seem very rushed and immature, but I still really can't justify Lois's behavior here. Not to mention that this totally contradicts her behavior in season 7 when Reese gets a wife after knowing her for like 1 hour. Lois and Hal leave for a couple days and have Lois's mother, Ida, watch over them. Ida didn't come alone, however. She brought a young girl with her named Reduca and plans to have Malcolm and Reese compete over who gets to marry her. Reese ends up winning and they end up getting married on the spot. So, Lois fails to see the legitimacy of Francis's marriage because he met Piyama and decided to marry her over a several-hour journey from Alaska. Let's take a look at Reese's marriage. Reduca is a young girl who was brought over to the house by the reputable character of Ida, who was then used as a trophy for Malcolm and Reese to fight over. They literally exchanged like 5 lines of dialogue together before getting married. And also, the only reason that Reese even agreed to this was because he figured out that if he married her, he could have
physical adult interactions with her.
So how does Lois react when she comes home and finds out that Reese is married? She's confused at first, but not immediately out of the gates being dismissive about it like she was with Francis. Instead, she actually gives Reese and Reduca the benefit of the doubt and even lets them stay in their garage. Later, when they have dinner together, she ends up being super supportive of Reese and Reduca after seeing how they are together. Why does Lois approve of Reduca? Because she screams at Reese and bosses him around. Yeah.
I think I'm done.
Reese, please!
These are the arms that long to lock you inside.
And the double standards aren't limited to how Lois treats her kids. Sometimes Lois is a hypocrite. Lois is continually shown throughout the series to despise smoking and has punished both Hal and some of her kids for doing so. Yet, in season 5, when Malcolm gets a job at the Lucky Aid, he catches Lois red-handed smoking a cigarette. Later in season 5, Hal comes home with a brand new hot tub. Lois is obviously furious at him since they are poor and can't afford it, but once the hot tub is set up, the entire family begins enjoying the new hot tub. Except for Lois, of course. Lois has made her position on hating the new hot tub clear, so she refuses to join in despite the fact that she secretly wants to. Later, she manages to send Hal and the boys off to go do something so she can be alone and enjoy the hot tub, despite fiercely rejecting the notion earlier. And I think moments like these are important because they remind us that Lois isn't some perfect moral authority who always knows better than everyone else. She can be stubborn, hypocritical, controlling, and completely unwilling to admit when she is wrong. But does any of that actually make her a bad mom? After looking at all of this, I still think Lois is a good mom. That obviously doesn't mean she is a perfect mom. Far from it. There are moments where she goes way too far, moments where she refuses to listen to her kids, and moments where her obsession with teaching them a lesson ends up teaching them the completely wrong lesson instead. But I also don't think you can judge Lois without considering the family that she is actually raising. Malcolm, Reese, Dewey, and Francis, and Jamie, are not easy children. A lot of the time, Lois's anger isn't coming out of nowhere. She is responding to complete chaos. And underneath all of the yelling, punishments, and insanity, Lois clearly cares about her kids. That doesn't excuse the things she does wrong. But I also don't think being a good parent means never doing anything wrong. So, was Lois a perfect mom? Absolutely not. But was Lois a good mom? Despite all of her flaws, I think she was. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe so more Malcolm in the Middle videos will appear in your feed. And also, YouTube thinks you'll enjoy this video right here, so I highly suggest going to check it out.